Alright, we start with Egypt, building Thebes on the coast. We see that we have, over to the north of Thebes, we have lots of productive plains land, and to the south we've got lots of grasslands for farms. So decent amount of food, decent amount of production. Not a lot of other resources, but that's okay. We look north and we've got some. We're not as close as we thought we are. We're looking north and see we are on a peninsula. Looking south, though, we see in a forest there's Germany. Lots of forest terrain, and even further south we have Persia. Now I'm thinking at this point, oh, I'm worried about Germany. I think Germany's going to want to attack because we're so close. Proximity is a bit of an issue. I look even further south, oh, maybe I can use Persia to make friends with Persia and launch an attack on Germany. Sandwich Germany. Unfortunately, that didn't work out because Germany seemed to be more fond of Persia than me, and so I that didn't work out too well at all. But I'm looking around and I'm moving towards the west. I see other states. Oh, great states. Can use them as shelter from the greater civilization. Now, a lot of my video went corrupt, so we had to cut out a few years. But then I look around. I've explored the whole map, and I see fairly fragmented civilizations. To the south, we've got the Roman civilization, a little bit more so able to do its own thing. And then we've got the Spanish civilization, of whom is going crazy. They're just running around hitting everything. And also we find that almost all of the religions are on this one continent. There's only one religion, that's Christianity, started from the English on the other continent. So I'm realizing, shoot, I really need to get my astronomy so I can get over the other continent. So I focus my energy at getting the ability to cross the ocean to the other continent. And as I'm building up, the Germans attack. Oh my gosh, the Germans are going in hard. So I try my best to take out all of the melee units to make sure that they can't actually enter Thebes. And I was only successful in destroying the melee units with my catapult and my my walls in Thebes. A lot of people are providing me with resources, declaring war on me, and then realizing, I'm going to survive this. So you don't want to be at war with me. I'm setting up my patronage, and here's the thing. We're setting up from my city of Thebes. This is a pretend Islam, it's not real Islam. And we're taking up God of Craftsmen, a little bit of additional productive power to add to the fact that we've got plains. In fact, we're Egypt and we have greater monument building skills. And we've also got type to ensure that we've got money coming in from these other countries, and this is why we especially want the other continent to be sending money our way. We've got divine inspiration because we're Egyptian. We're going to be building a lot of wonders. And we've got missionary zeal. So our missionaries are on a bit more zealous in their providing of religion. And so I'm looking around and I'm thinking, the Persians have just taken the Germans. While the Germans were attacking me, they used up all their resources, and hence they couldn't defend against the Persians. So obviously the Persians did come around, and we did sandwich them, but it was on their grounds, and Persia gets the meat of the German cities. But that's okay, because they suddenly declare a war on me, and that gives me a chance to turn around and take the city. Oh, no, it's not yet. Defending. And, oh yes, we've just explored the other continent. Another went corrupt, and we've explored the other continent, and our missionaries are running over and converting the eastern side of the western side. We're converting the western side of the other continent, France, Greece, and later America. A little bit of the Huns. Converting them to our religion. We realize that the Americans are taking up communism, and the Huns are taking up autocracy. Now, this is totally in contrast to our side. We have the most powerful civilization on our side of Siam, and they're taking up but
I'm teaming out. I want the Iroquois, and I want our civilization. We take up freedom, and so India is going to come under attack because India is really weak. They aren't really focusing too much on their defense. So, meanwhile, the Persians are going at us again, attacking our city-states. So we're going to turn around and we're going to take our cities back. These are the cities that we should have taken at the start when the sandwich occurred, but they did it on their terms. So, we're going to be taking back the German cities within the Persian Empire. We're not going to liberate them, we're going to keep them for ourselves. I loaded up the biggest military I could, and here we go. Oh, not yet. Obviously I'm a bit ahead of myself. Into the 1500s. At this time Spain is getting destroyed, so Spain has been destroyed. The Siam has been making use of Madrid and Barcelona, which are wicked for production, and it's really set Siam apart from the rest of the continent. Also, Buddhism is doing extremely well. It's managing to outlast, on our continent, all of the religions, and especially my one. My one's restricted to only our 3 cities, but on the other continent, my religion's doing a lot better. That's really my secret to the success of my religion, is the other continent. Now, we're attacking the Persians, hitting them back. I believe they've been under pressure from the Romans, who are inhabiting the islands next to the Persians to the south. But we managed to take Esan, and slowly we take Munich. It is a tough battle, but we managed to take Munich. Also trying to get the religion. Also keeping an eye on the religious part, on the other continent, and also around about this point, Buddhism overtakes 2 of our cities. Even Thebes gets taken over by Buddhism. The only city that didn't get taken over by Buddhism was Heliopolis, which maintained Islam all the way through. Now Cologne, this is the real stopping point. Cologne is I realized I couldn't go any further because the Persian had a really good navy on the inside of the giant inlet or sea that we had in the middle that was isolating us from the rest of the continent. So Cologne was a big stopping point, a bit of a problem. We lost a lot of army there, and it was strategically quite an important place to take as well. But that was a pity. But we realized at this point that my best friends, the Iroquois Indians, were about to get wiped out. The Siam was pushing hard, and I needed to buy a city. I managed to buy a city off the Indians right next to the Siamese capital. Now this gave me great advantages. This gave me the ability to bomb and assault the Siamese capital directly, and at a place that I could bring my naval units, my navy in to settle before I went into attack. It was brilliant.
So I had a city on the Mongolians on the other continent. I didn't really use the city much, but it was fascinating having it. It was always a puppet state that I kept under police and under control. Now I burned down Hamburg, and because Hamburg was too inland, it wasn't really any use to us. So I built an Lampenton, and this city built up really quickly. I made sure I put a lot of money into building the city up nice and quick. Now we're focusing on getting our commerce together. We're going to make lots and lots of money. We've already got freedom sorted out. We've got democracy and many of those sort of things pumping in our city, and it's really a class act that we managed that so quickly. The Iroquois are under brutal assault, and they're holding strong, but they're not going to hold strong much longer. The Siam is going to push through any moment now, and I'm really prepared for it because I realized that was going to happen. The Siam did go in for a naval attack on Heliopolis, but remember, Heliopolis, Memphis, and Thebes have been really my mainstay. They're my main cities, and so Heliopolis didn't really have any trouble at all fending it off. And that did give me a naval opening, because when that naval attack came in, I started building the first diesel submarines, realizing that I was going to need something that will give me the strength of the sea, and that worked out really well, because when I launched my attack on Siam just now, those diesel submarines wiped out their naval vessels without them even having a chance. So it was really good. We set up aircraft carriers, and we launched bombing raids upon the city. Oh, I can't say it properly, but the Siamese capital. Siamese capital didn't really have a chance. Even though Siam had a far better army than we did, we had the navy, and so we could take the coastal cities. And we did. We took the coastal cities back.
including all of the ones that they had been taken from the Iroquois when they were wiped out, and we gave them back to the Iroquois. We liberated them to the Iroquois again. We also took back Barcelona and Madrid, as we're going to do now. And Barcelona and Madrid went to the Iroquois once again. The Iroquois are my friends, and they've taken up freedom and democracy. And I want to spread democracy throughout our continent. Also, the Byzantine Empire has taken up democracy, but they haven't really been as friendly to me. And I suppose it's because I haven't really focused much attention on them. Yeah, there goes Madrid, and Barcelona will be next. I'm also giving loads and loads of materials to the Iroquois, hoping that they'll be able to stand up to any invaders. They haven't really got too much risk of invasion because the Byzantine are under a huge amount of pressure from the Communist Republic of Rome. So the Byzantines aren't really going to care too much about invading the Iroquois. And the Iroquois of an equal, they're both democratic nations where the Communist Republic of Rome is it's not very nice. It's order orientated. It's a bit controlled. So this is when I suddenly launch an attack on the Romans. I go on, I take the island, I burn this thing down, and I go straight for the capital. Once again with my navy, I'm able to go straight for the capital, and I launch an attack on the capital area. This attack was only useful at shutting them down. It meant that they couldn't produce as much as they could. Their mainstay of their economy and their science was down. The universities were down. So I was able to slow them down so our democracies could make way. And meanwhile, the autocracy of Attila has taken over half the continent. They had wiped out the French, and they'd wiped out the Americans had wiped out the Greeks, and the half of the other continent was Attila, and the rest of it was America versus the Huns. The Huns were a terrible autocratic civilization. They were just raging it. People were living in abject poverty, but they were able to fight the Americans. The Americans were communists, and they had the greatest science. But as you can see, if you look at that, almost everybody voted for me. Even Attila the Hun did. He didn't have many friends, and I had an invested interest in ensuring that the Americans were under control, so I provided them with a lot of resources to ensure the Americans didn't go as far out of control as I could. But he was an autocrat, and he was really harsh. Where America, I provided them with resources at first because I didn't want Christianity to take control, and they were good at controlling Christianity. They kept it down, and they adopted my religion of Islam really, really nicely. The Americans did, so it was really cool. Yeah, so you see, America had greatest crop yields, they had the most land, and they had the most soldiers. Also, better literacy. America had better literacy, so we had the greater population, and we're slightly more productive. I suppose that's the way of the Egyptians. We are wonder builders, so we're obviously quite productive. The score wasn't all that great, but we were under a lot of pressure, and we did win in the end. Blah 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 blah. Go on. But basically, the main players in this match, I believe, were the Romans. The Romans slowly built up. They slowly wiped people out, and they took the southern part of our continent.
The Siamese were going to be the real ones. I mean, communism was really going to win the whole match, really, to be honest. If it wasn't for our pushing back of Siam and re-establishing the Iroquois. I didn't want to overexpand, so taking the cities for myself wouldn't have been too useful, especially considering I took freedom as my line, and freedom doesn't really want a massive sprawling civilization. I'm looking at the times that have gone by, and golden age is beginning. Really, the computers seem to get into the golden ages really quick. The other continent was the poverty-stricken West, which was the Huns, versus the East, which was the Americans. The Americans were very wealthy. They had great scientific advancements. They were ahead of everybody. In fact, they had a Apollo program. They were about to get into space when we finished. It was a close one. I just managed to perform a diplomatic victory by pulling everybody together into the United Nations.
and I made I made enough votes in the United Nations for the victory. But if it wasn't for me, the Americans would have probably won. The Americans had a very, very strong, sprawling civilization, huge amounts of land, and massive crops. They were producing a lot. Well, not producing a lot. They had a lot of resources available to them. But the Huns were amazing. They fought like crazy. Even though they were technologically far inferior to the Americans, they managed to hold their own against the Americans with their autocratic ways. So it was very, very handy. Kept the Americans under control. I was a little bit nervous about the Romans, but because I didn't want them to take over the Byzantines. With their communism, they were looking like they were going to be able to take over the Byzantines, but the Byzantines were quite strong on their own as well. So I mean, I think I was pretty safe. But I went in I went in and demolished their insides just to be safe. To be honest, the Iroquois, even though I tried to rebuild them, I tried to get them back into their old ways when they were doing well. They never really had it going. I probably should have given it to the Byzantines and tried to build a better relationship with the Byzantines. I was just a bit worried because the Byzantines didn't really like me that much. I think we had a few misunderstandings as the game went on, and religious conversions against their religion made them a little bit unhappy. But we managed to get the major east side of our continent, a little peninsula to ourselves, and that was really the main thing that was keeping us isolated from the major wars. Most of the inside continent really got obliterated, and you could tell there were people getting so fragmented and smashed. I think that was a real problem for the Iroquois. They were very, very fragmented after the Siamese came through and took their center bases. They were never really able to do anything at that point. And I have to admit, though, even though the Byzantines took up freedom and the Iroquois took up freedom, for some reason they did clash. They did come into conflict at some point. I think proximity was a bit of a problem. If you put two civilizations too close to each other, they will attack each other at some point or another. It's just about what you do and how you make use of your diplomacy. I was focusing my efforts as soon as I realized how isolated. Now, it was useful for me because I had those city-states separating me from the rest of the map on my little continent, my little peninsula on the continent. I knew that I needed to keep friendship with those city-states if I was going to stay alive. So it was basically the point I had
to go down the peninsula and keep good relations with the city-states. But it actually, strangely enough, it worked in my favour along with religions as well, because I spreaded my religion to the other island. Everybody seemed to like me, and that continued on to the rest of the match. And I managed to get votes in the UN Secretary Council, even from the autocrats, the Huns, who owned half a continent at the end of the match, which was quite impressive considering they were under so much pressure. At one point I thought the French were going to destroy them, but the Huns managed to hold through. And actually, they destroyed the French, which kind of shocked me. Time spent 16 hours. It was a 16-hour long match. It's a very long match. And you can see how it's rolling through here. I'm starting on the very right side of the map. You see on the peninsula. I'm expanding down. You see the Germans in the middle, in the forest. And down south, you've got the red, the Persians. And the rest of our continent are going religiously crazy. The religion spreads really, really fast, and almost all of the religions were on our side of the map. I think the English had a slight advantage on their continent, because the English on the other continent, the red on the east side of the other continent, were the only ones that had religion. So their religion spread with impunity, and they took up theocracy, of course, and made great use of that. That would have got them vast amounts of diplomatic play. I mean, if I'm going to take up your religion, we're probably going to be friends. I mean, that helped them gain friendships, and they managed to become very powerful. For a long time, they were looking like they were going to be the great superpower,
I was purposely turning people against them, putting a lot of effort on that. And strangely enough, the Russians only built one city for a very long time in Moscow, and they didn't really extend from that, where Attila went really high extensionism, and so did the Mongols. The Mongols were very similar in nature, but unfortunately I think it seems the Huns did a little bit better at it at the time, where the French were very stable. They were always stable all the way through. And we're looking at the middle of our continent, the one in the middle of the continent with the yellow,
the grey-blue. No, that's not really a colour, but they did alright. And the greys, in this middle of the continent. The middle of the continent was mostly freedom, and the yellow, of course, which is us on the east side. And the top and bottom of our continent was totally communism. So we had to fight the top and the bottom, from the top and the bottom. I'm not sure if the Romans and the Siamese, at the top and bottom, were allies, but they did really, really well for that industrial era time. It was post-industrial era when we started to go to the modern era and then the information era where they started to fall back again, and that was because of my naval intervention. The Romans continued to spread. I think the Romans were a little bit more relaxed, and yeah, and that was a victory. That was a fantastic game. It went really well. There were a few worrying moments. I was worried I made a really bad gambit when I chose to help out the Iroquois, because the Iroquois turned out not to be as good as I thought they were. I guess they were under a lot of pressure though. They were in the middle of the main continent, and they survived the religious craziness, and so what. I placed a gambit on them making it, and I kind of didn't make it. It kind of didn't play out. But my gambit on the Americans turned out really good. The Americans did a lot of damage on the English and the English theocracy, and that was really successful. Now you can see that the score, oh, that was just my mother. But score was really good. We managed to pull ahead. With something more interesting, I'm just setting up the Siam. You've got to keep Siam up. Greece up. Greece is interesting because you can see how it got wiped out quite quickly by the Americans. I didn't want the Greeks to go down because the Greeks were actually my first conversion. I converted them first to Islam on the other continent. But that's alright. I made a lot of really bad bets in this. Culture per turn. Egypt was far ahead. We kept our civilization small and focused a lot on cultural. I was considering cultural victory at a lot of parts of the match. It was only when the Persians, I realized I needed to help the Siamese, and the Persians were getting a bit of an issue, and I figured I'll expand a bit. Number of non-techs. The Americans only just overtook us. That was alright. The population. Well, funny enough, it says on here that the Americans had a greater population, but it said in the demographics that Egypt had enough different higher populations. I'm not exactly sure who had the higher population, but you can say I had the most dense population, and America probably had the most, how should I put it, sporadic population. Egypt was extremely densely populated. It had great cultural influence, especially through religion. Total land, Americans owned up on that. America basically, in the end, America really had it. The Siam, you can see Siam was right up there until the very end. And see here it says Egypt's got the most population. The Americans have the great crop yield. Egypt had the manufacturing goods and the GNP. The Americans had by far the most land, I'd say.